Welcome to Rio Bravo Rockland's Confined Space Attendant Training. Please pay close attention to this. The job you'll be doing is very important. Rio Bravo Rockland is a 25 megawatt biomass power plant. We burn wood waste in a large boiler to make steam. We use that steam to turn a turbine generator to make electricity. When the plant operates, we wear out steel surfaces inside the boiler and heat transfer areas, and we have to go in and make repairs on the steel and on refractory. In order to make those repairs, we need to enter confined spaces. OSHA defines a confined space as a place large enough and so configured that an employee can bodily enter to perform work and has limited or restricted means of entry or exit, and is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. Here are some examples of some of the entrances to confined spaces on our plant site. You'll see the danger sign noting confined space, enter by permit only, and a square or round hatch, often bolted shut until ready for entry. A permit required confined space meets the criteria for a confined space as well as some other criteria. It contains or has a potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere. It contains a material that has a potential for engulfing an entrant. It has an internal configuration such that an entrant could be trapped. It contains any other recognized serious safety or health hazard. Non-permit required confined spaces have no potential for physical, chemical, or engulfment hazards. In order to enter confined spaces and do work on our plant site, we need to have a confined space plan. That plan consists of a confined space supervisor. This role is generally performed by one of the plant technicians. We need confined space entrants, people who are trained to go inside and work. LaborMax is not trained to go inside and work as a confined space entrant. We also need confined space attendants, also known as hull watch, and that is you. Confined space attendants need to be trained to recognize the hazards of entry. Listed here are some of the hazards upon entry in some of our confined spaces: natural gas, anhydrous ammonia, limestone or ash vantage, wood fuel, huge fans, electrical hazard, ozone, low oxygen environment, high carbon monoxide environment, heat. Confined space attendants also need to be trained on how the hazard could develop, what the signs, symptoms, and/or consequences of exposure are. Natural gas. Breathing a small amount of natural gas for a long period of time will give you a headache, nausea. If you breathe a large amount of natural gas, the real hazard is you're not breathing enough oxygen. So it's a low oxygen environment, which can cause death. Anhydrous ammonia. Anhydrous ammonia has a very distinct smell. It attacks the moisture in your mucous membranes, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your breathing passages. It doesn't take too much of a breath of anhydrous ammonia to cause disorientation and death. Limestone and ash vantage. These chemicals are ash additives. They're both caustic. If you get it on your skin, it could cause an irritating rash. Wood fuel. If our wood fuel feed system is turned on while people are in the combustor, we put enough wood fuel in there that we could actually bury them. The hazard here is engulfment. Huge fans. We have fans large enough that move enough air that if turned on at full speed, they would actually lift a person off their feet. Electrical hazard. One of our confined spaces uses high voltage electricity to clean flue gas. If this electricity was left on during entry, there would be an electric shock hazard. Ozone. This same space that uses electricity to clean the flue gas also, when operational, creates ozone. If the fans are misoperated, we could draw that ozone into another space where people are working. Two of the largest hazards that we face here at Rio Bravo Rockland are a low oxygen environment and a high carbon monoxide environment, due to the cutting and burning we do inside the spaces on steel. Both of these have the same consequences of exposure. The first is disorientation. People actually lose the ability to realize something's wrong. After that comes death. Heat. When we first shut down the plant, many of these confined spaces are still very hot inside. We need to cool them. Often we will enter while it's still rather hot in there. We need to limit exposure times and watch carefully for heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Before I go much further, I want to tell you, we just talked about some very serious hazards that could happen. I don't want to scare you. We have not had a serious confined space incident at Rio Bravo Rockland involving any of these hazards. We're very careful to do the right thing and make sure it's safe to enter. But part of your training is to know the worst case scenario. One of the main responsibilities of the confined space attendant is to continuously maintain an accurate count and identification of all entrants. You will be given a book that corresponds to the hole you are watching. This is an example of one of our confined space books. Across the top is the name of the hole, combustor crossover door. Along the bottom, a description of where it can be found. Inside the book, there will be a copy of the confined space entry permit. This has listed the authorized entrance, any hazards that could be expected inside of the space, and signatures from the confined space entry supervisor. Also inside the book, there will be a sign-in sheet. Across the top will be the location name, combustor crossover, the date, and the permit number. This will all be filled out by the control room operator. Below it, there are columns for entrance, printed name, company, signature in, time of entry. This is filled out before the entrants enter. When they exit the space, they write the exit time and they sign out. Everyone signs in, everyone signs out. To the far right are 3 columns for the confined space attendant to fill out. The name of the attendant and the time their duty started and ended. Even if you're just relieving someone for break, you sign in as attendant, the time you started and the time you ended. The attendant needs to remain outside the space during entry until relieved by another attendant. 3 very important things in that statement. First, remains outside the space, no matter what. 2/3 of all confined space fatalities are would-be rescuers. We need someone to be outside the space letting us know there's a problem. If you go in and succumb to the same problem, we still don't know anything's wrong, and now we have 2 victims. You must remain outside the space at all times, no matter what. Next, remains outside the space during entry until relieved. We try to give you regular breaks and lunches. It's not always easy. Try to be patient. If you need a personal break, give the control room operator as much notice as possible. And last, until relieved by another attendant. When you are relieved by another attendant, or if you relieve another attendant, be sure and give each other good turnover. Show the oncoming attendant where the signatures are in the book, how many people are in the hole. Make sure there's a spare pen, extra sign-in sheets. Make sure his radio works. The same thing when you're taking over a hole. Make sure you're shown where the signatures are of the people in the hole. Make sure there's a spare pen, some extra sign-in sheets. Make sure the hole is ready to go before you take it. If there's a problem, stop. Don't take it. Get a hold of the control room operator and get the problem straightened out before you take over the hole. The attendant also needs to communicate with authorized entrants as necessary to monitor entrant status and to alert entrants of the need to evacuate the space. Part of your job is literally to chat them up on their way in and out, to make sure that they don't show any symptoms of any of the hazards that could be inside the space. If someone doesn't seem quite right, call control. The way you communicate with entrants for an evacuation, many of the entrants have radios. In any case, if you need to evacuate them, you get as close to the hole as you can without entering, and you yell loudly, "Evacuate the space, everyone out." Then you stand by and make sure that everyone comes out, signs. We need to make sure everyone is signed out of that space before you leave. The confined space attendant also monitors activities inside and outside the space to determine if it is safe for entrants to remain in the space. They would also order an evacuation through the control room operator under the following circumstances. If the attendant detects a prohibited condition, if you smell natural gas or anhydrous ammonia coming from the hole or around the outside of the hole that could be drawn in, if the attendant detects the behavioral effects of hazard exposure in an entrant. In talking to the entrants, you notice that someone's just not right. If the attendant detects a situation outside the space that could endanger entrants, there's a fire outside the space, someone up above the hole is dropping sparks or rocks. If the attendant cannot safely and effectively perform the required duties. Let's say you needed that personal break and it's been 20 minutes and the control room operator still hasn't got anyone there and you really need that break. You cannot leave the hole unattended. In that case, you would evacuate the space, and when everyone's out, you could leave the hole and take your personal break. Under no circumstances can you leave the space unattended with people inside. The confined space attendant would summon rescue and other emergency services as soon as the attendant determines the entrants may need assistance to escape from confined space hazards. And how would you do that? You use your radio. You call control. Whenever you're performing the duties of confined space attendant, you'll be issued a radio. The radios look very similar to the radio on the slide. They're very simple to use, but there's some things you need to know. Stay on channel 3 unless otherwise directed. There will be a lot of radio traffic in the plant on different channels. Channel 3 is reserved for hole watch and the control room. Turn your volume up at least halfway. In some louder areas, you may need it all the way up. Our radios also have remote microphones. Keep that microphone clipped somewhere near your ear, high on your body, so that you can hear it. When you want to speak, press the button, pause just a half a second, and then start to talk. When you're done, pause, and then release the button. If you try to rush that and start to talk right as you press the button, you'll lose a half a word and be very hard to understand. The radios are on site for work purposes only. Please do not chatter. Most all of the contractors we have on site are trained in confined space entry. Rio Bravo Rockland employees are trained in confined space entry. Labor Max is not trained in confined space entry. You need to take the following actions when unauthorized persons approach or enter a permit space. Warn the unauthorized person they must stay away from the permit space. Advise the unauthorized person that they must exit immediately if they have entered the space. Inform the authorized entrants and the entry supervisor of any unauthorized entry into the space. Another responsibility of the confined space attendant is to perform non-entry rescues as specified by the employer's rescue procedures. Your non-entry rescues are to call control. As a confined space attendant, you can perform no duties that might interfere with your primary duty to monitor and protect the authorized entrance. Now, climbing in and out of these holes is not easy, and you often have an arm full of tools to bring in or out with you. Can the attendant help with that? Absolutely. If someone in the space calls out for the attendant to reach over and hand them that wrench outside the space, sure, as long as it's not too heavy and it's going to hurt you, absolutely help them. If they ask you to go run down to their truck and grab it, no, you cannot. You must stay at the hole. To sum up, confined space attendant training: do not leave the space unattended, ever. Never enter the space, no matter what. Make sure your radio works. When in doubt, call for a radio check. When you first take over a hole, call for a radio check. Know the name of the hole you are watching. If you have trouble and need to call for help, we need to know where to send it. If you call out, hey, I'm at that round one by the big thing, there's like 20 round ones by the big thing. Know the name of the hole you are watching. Everyone signs in, everyone signs out. Every time, no matter what. The people going in and out of these holes are professionals. They're used to it. They do it all the time, and they will all forget. It is your job to remind them. If 4 or 5 people come out at once, don't blindly hand the book to the first one and assume they'll all do the right thing. Get downstream of them and make sure that everyone has signed out before they leave. When in doubt, call control. If you have questions about this training, when you get to the plant site, ask the control room operator.